I think I have a really good collection of games. I think my gaming collection is pretty awesome from the NES up until the PlayStation 5. I've been collecting games for a very long time. And I always felt like my collection is complete. I have everything I want. I've always said, like in the past videos, late last year, I was talking about there was maybe like four to six games that I want that I don't have. And most of those games are imports from overseas. There are games that are pretty expensive, even if they were released over here because they have a limited print. And I have been in no rush to buy them. I know the prices may continue to go up, but I always have to say that I need to keep looking to find the right deal that works for me when I come across that particular game. So it's about a half dozen that I want left. But there's another thing that really is irking me about my collection that I have an issue with, and it's delisted games. I think delisted games are creeping into my collection where I have this like big, thing about saving a game that was delisted from the digital stores. And most of them are like racing games because of licensing issues, or there's some games that I thought that was like really cool, and the fact that they're not available anymore, I always have like this fear with my digital collection, which I don't think that's a collection with my digital games. Maybe one day I won't have access to them anymore. And some games that are delisted and they're not necessarily on, they're still available based on my library. They could be taken away, something could happen, and I'll have to resort to only physical copies. And there, to me, I feel like there's a little bit of you know extremism going on with that. Well, I feel like there's always a way to get your digital games one way or another, so you shouldn't have to worry. But I always had this, completeness, or this, assurance that if I have the game physical, it's mine. It's cool. Outside of like maybe some disc rot or something wrong with the cartridge, I would always have the game. And that's where a lot of games that I've been buying, for the past few months, not a lot of games. I would say like every time I would go out and buy a game, I realized that I see a game that's delisted. That's how I came across Spec Ops: The Line. That's how I came across. Well, I guess I could show you these games right here. Um, these games are pretty much all racing games. All of the Grid and Dirt series, Grid 1 through 4, all of these have been delisted off of digital platforms. Grid 1 has been delisted. And I didn't even know Grid Autosport was delisted as well. Now, Grid 2 and Grid 2019 has also been delisted. So I'm adding those to the games that I'm absolutely going to get because I love racing games. Project Cars 1 and 2 are two other games that have been delisted. So that's four more games I'm probably going to end up picking up. And I'm trying my best, and I know I'm pretty good at this because I have decent self control. I'm trying not to get into the weeds to where I'm just gonna be buying games that I see that I found out that are delisted, and I gotta run out and get. That's something that a lot of people can get into. So these are games that I do have digital outside of Dirt 1 and Dirt 2. I don't have those digital on my PC because I didn't buy them at the time when it was on Steam. But I've always wanted the entire series, and like I said, these games are phenomenal. They're great games to have, and just like I think I talked about it, Spec Ops: The Line. That's another fantastic game that's been delisted, and I end up picking that up. And one thing, I don't, if you're in any type of sense of worrisome, or any type of sense of FOMO or whatever, I guess you can call it FOMO, as far as, these delisted games, just try your best to stay away from the websites that show off these delisted games, that showing you that, hey, these games aren't available no more. I mean, there's a website out there. Obviously, you should know it if you've been gaming for a while, about these games that are no longer available on your digital storefronts. So for me, I try to go out and buy these games and just to have assurance that I have them. But I know one thing is I don't want to get carried away with buying like a whole bunch of games that are delisted just because they're delisted. I do have digital copies of a lot of these games on certain platforms. Like I said, the Dirt 3 and 4, I got both of them on my PC. Grid 1, Grid Autosport, I have that on my PC. Grid 2, I have that on my Xbox 360 and on my PC. Grid Autosport, the same thing, PC and on my Xbox. So so I have multiple copies, but like, what if my PC go out? What if, that something happens where I can't have access to those games anymore? So what do you do? So I've always been a fan of physical copies of games, which that's a whole another thing we can get into at some point, especially when you're talking about how companies nowadays aren't really catering to the physical copies of games, and people are having all these doom and gloom sessions about disc rot and everything. And is it even worth companies going out to relive and put out more DVD or Blu-ray or old cartridge based games? Should they still do it now? I don't want to get too far into this, but I think they should continue to do it. But I know the landscape of how things are. People want games that are digital. Hell, some people even want games that are streamed, and that's how they roll. And I'm not the ones to say I'm gonna fight against digital games, because it's like, for me, I don't. It's not that I don't care. It's just that I know how technology is, and if it really gets to the point where um the physical game's going to come back, they're going to come back. I mean, just like the vinyl records of the world, or in some cases, even cassettes and CDs are coming back a little bit. So there's going to be enough people at some point that will be say, hey, look, I don't want an all digital future, and they'll come back around. I mean, I'm a huge advocate for physical copies, but I mean, I understand like the way the wind is blowing, and it's not that, like I said, I'm not gonna be a big advocate against digital copies. I have nothing a problem with them. The main thing I have a problem with digital games is the way that the fact they can give them to you and take them away. And I will say this: if all these other companies would do what GOG does, where you get the games and the games are yours, I wouldn't be even thinking about, you know, buying, certain some of these games. But I do understand some licensing issues are, a thing when it comes to music and TV, not TV, but music and cars. And when it comes to gaming, I get it. It's one of the reasons why we don't have Outrun anymore. Outrun was a game that, basically showed off the Ferrari, and you don't have that anymore because of licensing reasons. So I get it. But at the end of the day, I'm like, for the most part, if we had a mechanism where we can get those games and they'll always be yours, nothing, they can't take them away from you or anything like that, I'm all for it. I think for the most part, the PlayStation 3, the Xbox 360, they have this same thing going on where your digital games are still on your console. You could take it offline and still play. You have the CMOS thing with the PS3, which they need to fix at some point, but they have it to where um you don't have to be online to play those games. You can go offline on your PS3, and whatever game you purchase, long as your user name is on that PS3, is linked, they will play. So I don't know how that's going to work for the PS4, PS5, Xbox. I don't even know if Xbox will even be interested in anything like this, because Xbox is pretty much into um, the whole thing that they're basically doing what Steam and what's the other company, Epic Games, are doing right now. They're basically trying to give you a PC service on a console, and I'm not sure how concrete your digital games will be. If something was to happen, can you go offline with the Xbox Series and still play those games? I'm not sure. I know Does It Play does a pretty good job with that stuff. Shout out to doesitplay.org. But I never really tested it to see. I don't even know. But my thing is, I wouldn't be. I think that's the main thing I'm really against, is the fact that how the access of these digital games are. You don't know if you will be able to have them one day, the next day you may not, because of just because. With these physical copies of games, games like, which is a great game, games like Dirt 3, you'll always have this game if you have this. And not only that, this game, Dirt 2, which is, probably one of the best rally games out there, you know, with these type of games are, awesome. And you don't have them anymore. Look at the other racing games, the Forza Horizon series, 1 through 4, they're gone now. You have to, buy a physical copy to play them. Like I just talked about, Project Cars is another one. So as much as I love, games in general, these racing games are the ones that getting hit the most. But it makes me want to go out and start buying a lot of these delisted games, and I already know that it's not my best interest to do so, but I know that these are games that I'm going to play. And my big fear about that is I just don't want to get carried away doing it. I don't want to get carried away, buying these games and be like, oh man, I'm just buying games because they're no longer on the digital platforms. Like there are some games that are delisted and I can care less. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I'm not somebody that's trying to buy every game on every console that's digital. Like you know who that the guy that scammed. Let's not even talk about the completionist right now. Shout out to the completionist, bro. But I'm not trying to be that guy. At the end of the day, I just want to buy the games I want and own the games I want. And if we didn't have a issue with games being delisted and games that aren't yours because of some legal mumbo jumbo, I wouldn't half of this stuff back here. I probably wouldn't even have if I knew that I could have everything on a hard drive and it wouldn't be taken away from me. But the physical stuff is the way to go if you want ownership, in my opinion. Y'all let me know what y'all think, man. Do you have the same issue when it comes to your collection? Do you feel like you gotta buy everything physical because of it? What about games that you're trying to find today? If they become delisted, do you go out and look for them? What do you do in that situation? Do you just try to buy the game digital and just keep it on a hard drive, or do you feel like you have to have it physical? I feel like I have to have it physical, but I know at the end of the day, it's a slippery slope, and I'm trying my best already not to go down that route. I already have like, a half a dozen games that I want, that I know I truly want, and they're going to be delisted. Well, they're not delisted, but they're just, you know, they're only physical in that sense. And I really want a hard copy of those games. They're like 6th generation games and below. And you have games like these, like the Project Cars and 1 and 2 and Grid 2 and Grid Legends, not Grid Legends, but Grid 2019. I want those games because I know that those are games that are delisted and they're not coming back. They're just not. I don't think so. They tried it with Grid Auto Sport and it's delisted again. you know, but it is backwards compatible in the series, so that's pretty cool. Y'all let me know what y'all think. I'm gonna get up out of here. Thank you guys for making it this far. I really appreciate it. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Y'all take it easy. I'm out. Peace.